Hello everyone and welcome back to the 13th technical unobtained episode. In this episode we're once again going to be messing around with async lines, and this time we're going to do it in order to get some illegal falling blocks and also get some illegal items that way. So let's start out with an explanation, and then I'll show us getting them in game. So first of all, let's get into the explanation. So the method of getting these falling blocks consists of two steps. First of all, we will need to use the word tearing glitch I have shown in the past two episodes on the registry palette in order to create non-falling versions of all desired blocks. So for example, command blocks, you usually can't get them in block form, and that is why we need to use the registry palette. And the second step is to get two async lines and then use word tearing on the Hashmap palette, so that's a smaller palette, in order to perform falling block swaps and get all the desired blocks as falling blocks, because if you have them in entity form and you drop them on a slab or a torch or something, essentially just kill the falling block, you get the items, and we of course want to get the items. So to get a falling block of a certain type, we need to directly replace a floating sand block by another block while an async observer line is also updating the sand. So looks like this. While the observers update the sand, we also do a set block or use some other way to change the block, and then we can get a falling end portal frame. And to replace a sand, we won't actually use a set block, but we will use word tearing on the Hashmap palette. And this requires an additional observer line. So this third thread will change the outcomes of the set blocks that are being done on thread 1. And then we also have the observers updating the sand. So essentially everything happens at the same time, and then we can get a falling end portal. So now we need to talk a bit more about the block state palettes, because in each subchunk block states get stored in a so-called palette, and the type of palette actually depends on the number of different block states in the subchunk. So when we have between 0 and 16 block states, we have a linear palette type, which isn't that important for us. And between 17 and 256 block states, we have the Hashmap palette. And when we have more than 256, we have the registry palette. And something that's important to note is that palettes upsize immediately when you add enough block states, but they only downsize when you completely unload and then reload the chunk. So it's very easy to upsize them, but difficult to downsize. And the registry palette we have already checked out, because we used it in episode 11 to create, for example, command blocks and structure blocks and end gateways. And in this episode, we will use the Hashmap palette. And we also checked the Hashmap palette out because in episode 12 we use it to mine bedrock. And yeah, now we'll explain the differences between the registry and the Hashmap palette, because the registry palette contains every block state from the game, essentially. So it always assigns the same block ID to every single block state that exists. And this is actually very interesting, because if we use word tearing in the registry palette, we can generate a list of bits that corresponds to any block ID in the game. So we can essentially make any block ID appear, and that's why we can get command blocks only using the registry palette. And the Hashmap palette is very different, because it only contains block states that exist or have existed in the past in the subchunk. So we can change which block IDs get assigned to the block. So in this registry palette, the block ID with ID 1 is always stone, but here it can be literally any block except for air. And word tearing on the hashmap palette can replace blocks by another block that already exists in the subchunk. So we can't make new blocks appear, but if we have the blocks in the subchunk already, we can get them in any other position in the subchunk. So there are also different types of hashmap palettes, because when you exceed a power of 2, the hashmap upsizes to a larger hashmap palette, and that way it changes the amount of bits each block has. So if you have between 17 and 32 block states, each block gets assigned 5 different bits. So the first block in the subchunk will essentially have block ID 1, but it will have 4 leading zeros, and with 6 bits it will have 5 leading zeros, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. And same goes for a 7-bit and 8-bit. It's just more bits to each block, because when you need to store more different block types, you of course also need more bits in order to save all of these block types. So for the generic falling block swap, which is what we'll be doing in this episode, we'll use the 7-bit hash map, and that requires us to have at least 56 block states, but less than 128 block states. Because if we have more than 128 block states, we get the 8-bit hash map palette, and we want the 7-bit one. So an hash map palette with n bits assigned to each assigns n bits to each block state in a chunk. A hash map palette with n bits assigns to each block state in the chunk a number with n binary digits. So that goes for every block except for air, because air always has the block ID of 0 no matter what you do, and the kth block that gets added to the chunk has a block ID of k. So the first block you add to the chunk will get block ID 1, the second 2, the third 3, etc. And when the chunk gets reloaded, and this is actually shifted around because it doesn't actually depend on the order in which blocks get added, but the order of the block IDs will depend on the x, z, and y coordinates. So first the x gets incremented and z and y remain 0, and then the z is incremented 1, and then x all the way to 16. And I will show this in game a bit too later. And you can find which block ID a particular block has by using the carpet command /palette posinfo. And you will get a display like this, which shows zeros and ones, and you can find out the block ID that way. And the command always prints out all the longs which contain the whole or part of the block ID. So if it's stored across 2 longs, it still prints out both longs, so it's very useful. And the red block is the one you have targeted using the command. Just like in a registry palette, there are some locations where a single block ID gets stored in 2 different longs, and for each hashmap palette the locations are at different places. So if you have different bit sizes, the locations will of course be different. And for a 7-bit hashmap palette at x equals 9 and z equals 12 in each chunk, there is a word tearing location cutting off the lowest bit. So this first bit here is being cut off, and that's what we actually want. And we will use it for the generic falling block method. And this is also why you can't use the 8-bit hashmap palette. The reason we use the 7-bit hashmap palette is because it gives us the most freedom, because we can add the most blocks to the chunk without it being the 8-bit hashmap palette. And we can't use the 8-bit hashmap palette because longs contain 64 bits, and 64 is divisible by 8, so that means there are never any of these locations where a block is stored across 2 longs. So you can't actually do word tearing in an 8-bit hashmap palette. Or at least you can't create new block IDs but you can still do word tearing, but just can't create any new blocks. If we assign block ID 2, which is 00010 to a command block, and block ID 3 to a sand block, then we can use that word tearing location for the following recipe. So we use these first 6 bits of sand and combine it with the last bit of air, and we can make a command block. So we make the 00010 of the command block. And whenever the word tearing is successful, a sand block will get directly replaced by a command block, and that's what we also need for a following block swap. We need that the sand block is directly replaced by the command block, which is actually what happens if we do this. And to easily assign the correct block IDs to the sand and the command block, we put a sand and a command block at the lowest Y level of the subchunk and then reload the chunk. That's essentially it. So let's check out the palette we have in our generic method chunk in our world. So we're now over here in the subchunk, which contains all of these illegal blocks, and we can actually see that over here is the 000 block in this chunk. So this position is the first block that will be added to the subchunk, and then we can check it out. If we run the palette posinfo command, we can see that it has the binary ID of 10000. So if we then go over here to this spawner and we run the palette posinfo, this is the second block that will be added to the chunk. So it will have ID 01, which is in binary 2, and then this will have 3, which will be 11 in binary. As we can see, it's 11. So all of these, we can combine this sand block with this spawner block. If we cut off this first one and replace it with a 0 from air, we can combine it into a spawner block. And how we're going to do that is actually using a piston clock, which is up here, because this is a generic method setup that wasn't designed by me. It was designed by Engarn, like that. So if we check out this position, we will see that the first bit is actually cut off there. So it's stored. This is the first long, it will have the 1, and the second long has the latter bits. So if we would do that using the sand and we make this one into a 0 by replacing it by air, which this piston clock will do for us, we can make these spawner blocks appear at this position. So how this is going to work is we'll have two separate async lines, as I said before. We'll have this async line, which is updating concrete powder or sand in the spawner's case in this position. And if we actually have this piston clock running, then when the piston retracts, it will happen in this order. First, this light blue stained clay will be removed, and that means that this concrete powder or sand block is actually floating up here because it hasn't been removed yet, because it is the third block that will be removed. So this async line that's updating it will create a ton of sand entities here because it's floating, and that means when updated it will create sand entities. And then we also have this async line over here that when this block is replaced by air, because when a piston retracts it changes the block at the previous position into air, it will be editing this long over here. So these 11100 blocks we can see over here are actually these observers, and that means that these observers have a chance of placing back this 10110 sequence over here, while the main thread changes this one into a 0. So then using this async line we have created a spawner at this position, while this async line was also updating the sand at this position. And that means that because the block was changed asyncly, it can create a falling block of a spawner. And we have pretty high chances at this position for that to actually work because we have the cluster as I've shown last episode. And this setup has a lot of handy features because when this piston clock is running, the opposite word tearing can also occur. That means that these observers can get stuck in the on state because the main thread says they're in the on state, while the async thread, which is actually pulsing over here, says no, they're in the off state. And then it gets stuck, but luckily this setup has a handy feature which will be activated when we activate this lever. And this says word tearing reset, and that's just a piston clock that moves these blocks back and forth every so often, and that means that they get reset. As you can see, when a piston moves observers, they all get turned into the on state. And when flicking this lever, it will just start this piston clock and also activate some other things. Mainly, it will activate a check that whether or not the piston clock is actually continuously firing, because if you have an immovable block like a command block at this position and you word tear it, but unfortunately you don't get the falling block, then it will be stuck at this position and then the piston clock can't move anymore and you need to remove it. And that's what this headless piston is for. When headless pistons actually retract, which will happen if this redstone block is retracted, then they can delete any block in front of them. So that is what happens when this there appears, for example, a spawner block or a command block which is immovable here. And then at precisely the right time, a TNT will be fired from a dispenser over here and will go through this water stream and then move into the position so that when the piston retracts, its piston head gets blown up again and we get another piston again in order to delete blocks again if we so need to. So now I've started up 2 async lines. If I click here, you can see they're pulsing, and I can activate both of these. And there is sand in the piston clock, which should coincide with spawners, so we should be getting some falling spawners. And as you can see, you can, oh wow, generated one. You can see kind of sand entities being left behind, kind of, because those entities are destroyed after the sand block is removed, but because they're created by this upper async line here. Oh, is this? No, I think it's working. Just can't get it to pulse now. Yeah, just generate another spawner, so it has to be working. Oh yeah, this one's the observe line gets locked by the piston clock when it's not needed, so that it doesn't update suppress at the wrong time. Yeah, so now spawner block generated, and that caused the piston clock to stop working, and then it was destroyed by the headless piston and another one was generated. Also, this looks very weird here because the chunk isn't sending any packets because the async line sends like too many packets and then it gets broken. Oh wow, there was like 2 at once or something. That was interesting. I wonder how many. Oh, another one. It's very fast because of the clustering. Let's see how many we have. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6, and it's only been on for like a minute or something. And yeah, if I stand up on a pillar here, oh, and destroy one of these falling blocks, we can actually get the spawner item too. And if we place it down, you can get big spawners like that. And as you can see over here, I've also started getting some different blocks. So I've already tested with the spawners here, and then we have all of these stone variants, because I'm actually planning on getting every falling block. So how will we do that? Well, we first need to place those blocks in a chunk. So you actually need to gather them, and that's why I have this chest, which as far as I know contains every item in 1.12, or at least every blocks item, which I checked using a block ID list. There is like 253 different block IDs, and then we have a bunch of variants. So for example, this concrete powder all just has metadata values which determine their color. Okay, and if we place this in a chunk, for some of these blocks it won't work. So if for example have these saplings, they will be updated by this line when they're created by word tearing. So we can't get them using this generic setup, but we can build another one for those blocks. And I've, as I said before, the Hashmap palette will upsize if we add too many block states. So if we do slash palette size is the command. Yes, you can see there are already 104 block states in here, so we can't just put all 400 blocks are in that chest containing all the blocks, I believe. If we just add them to the chunk, this will turn to a registry palette, so we need to load and unload this chunk, and async lines actually break if they're within 8 blocks of an unloaded chunk, so we need to move the async line elsewhere if we want to unload this chunk, because the async line is like pulsing here, and unloading this chunk will stop them from working. So that's what this setup is for. This is like a complete mess of redstone, but what it essentially does is, most importantly down here, it pushes in this observer first, and then like a block event later it will push in this iron block, and that way when the observer is placed, it won't actually send any block updates through this line, and there is a block update detector here and it won't pulse if I flick this lever. And what will actually happen is that the async line, as you can see, this observer is stuck here because the async line is actually running all the way over there, which is like 16 chunks away. So if I despawn the bot I have over there, the loader, then if I fly away, this chunk will just unload. And as you can see, all of these repeaters are on now because they have actually been activated by the async line. So I can probably fly over there now. Yes, so you can see those async lines are pulsing. And then we can unload this chunk, which is -252, -25. This is the important chunk. And it will only be unloaded for like a very short moment, I believe, because hopper loading will load it again. Yes, so it unloaded successfully. Yes, so now it's unloaded, and then I can move back in and it will all still work. because the clustering of that chunk is 0. If that chunk would have a higher clustering value and I would unload it, then it would get a high clustering value, which is bad for the falling block swaps. So now I can just flick this lever, and that will mean that these are back into their default state again, and this is unpowered, and the async lines are pulsing over here again. As you can see, they're pulsing, and now we can just activate this again, and we can start generating spawners again. And this is important because we need to unload the chunk in order to get the Hashmap palette to have the correct blocks if we add them to the sub chunk. So I can now show you an example of this in practice. So much like the spawner, we'll place this plank here, and then we need to leave space for the concrete powder blocks. So now we have this. And if we check the pallet size, it's 101. Should probably be a bit higher after I activate the contraption again. Okay, still 101, that's good. Oh yeah, the TNT breaking stuff can change some things. Okay, but now these blocks won't have the correct IDs yet. If we check the pulse info, this plank won't have ID 1. It will have a much larger ID. So we actually need to unload this chunk before the pallet will be changed. So then I'll use this contraption for that. That's where the lever is. Okay, so this got activated and these should be off. And that should be nice. And then we can unload our chunk. Hopefully it unloaded properly. Yes, okay. These, yeah, still alive. Then move back. And then we can check the values for the planks again. See if they're correct. And because the chunk unloaded, they should be. So now this is indeed the second block added to the chunk, and this should be the third, so 1 1. And that's 1 1 indeed. So if we were to now place white concrete powder in there, we should be able to get falling oak planks. So I have a chest here. And remove this, place this back, activate this, and wait a bit. Okay, so that was quite unlucky. Usually the setup is much faster, but as with all of these async line things, it's just random whether it's fast or not, so it doesn't really matter. Ah, just got another one, much faster. And if I now place the gray concrete, I get the birch planks and so forth. So now we actually run into another problem, because these planks are very cool and all, but I obviously want to keep them in falling block form, because I can get plank items by just cutting down a tree. Isn't that interesting? So that's actually what over there is for. I should sleep though, because it isn't properly lit up right now. Will be in the future though. Right. So we have all of these pistons over here with brewing stands on top. And if you don't know this, there is a way to create block entity dataless block 36, so the moving piston block without any data. So that's what's happened over here. I'm actually trying to place down the slime block here, but it doesn't work. And if I like pillar up a bit and drop a sand block, like this sand block isn't falling down, because this block here isn't actually air, it's the block 36 block, so the moving piston block. And in current versions, so in 1.12, you can just drop a falling block on a fence and it will stay there forever. But in newer versions, like 1.14, they will snap to the fence and become block form. And we don't want that to happen. We want to keep them in falling block form. But if we, this piston needs to be out of the way. If like this is still a falling block, you can see the hitbox line out of it. So using block 36, even in newer versions, you can keep these falling blocks. So you can keep them on top of fences, because then they're easier to move around using pistons. Because the block 36, of course, is immovable. So if you point a piston into this, I can't get rid of this sand block. The only way to do that is by breaking the block below, which destroys it. And imagine next to this plank block here is a block 36. If we then have a piston at the next layer, we can easily still move these falling blocks around. So that's what all of these are for. These ones have already been generated, but I also want to show the getting some of these block 36 to you guys, which has to be done using end crystals. Over here. Okay, I believe that's all I need. Oh no, the netherrack. Because when you move an end crystal while it's inside of a fire block, you actually blow it up, and that can happen in a specific part of the tick, which causes it to create these block 36. So this should be netherrack and fire. Oh, fire. End crystal, and be careful not to click on it. Then you move down here, and when we power this lever, this piston will be activated, which moves this end crystal, which makes it say, hey, I should blow up because I'm inside of this fire block over here. And then these pistons here will power, and it will look like they're piston heads, but they actually won't be piston heads. So let's do this. Blows up, and you can see all of these piston heads, and they look like piston heads, but they're actually block 36. And I can't show that right now, because if I right click on them, I actually destroy the block 36. So if you right click on a block 36, which has like a ghost block in it, you actually destroy it. So I should respawn the loader. So now the chunk over there is being loaded by that player, and I can safely reload without destroying the async lines. And now, as you can see, the piston heads are gone, and there is block 36 there. So it's actually very easy to create a lot of block 36 because this is 5 blocks and this is 5 blocks, 5, 5, so 4 times 5 is 20. So using one end crystal, you can easily generate 20 block 36 without data. And in order to store all the blocks, you only need like 430 block 36. So that requires like 25 end crystals. So you need to kill a couple of ghasts, but it isn't like you don't even need a ghast farm or something for such an amount of end crystals. So I will continue doing this, and then we'll start moving some interesting block 36 in, I guess. So I've now actually turned all of those piston contraptions into block 36, and I've also gotten most of these illegal blocks in falling block form and just moved them over here using some pistons. So let's get the items. So here is a structure block. This one you can't place down either. Then we have the repeating command block. And I believe this is the barrier block. That's why it's invisible. Oh, well, I'll pick it up later. Then regular command block. Chain command block. And this one is the structure void, I believe. So this looks a bit like a barrier block. It's way less well known than all of these others. And this is used in structure blocks. If you place this in a structure blocks area, then it won't get saved as an air block. So it essentially means that this structure block structure won't override the other structure. And I believe this is an end gateway which doesn't have an item, but you can just place these blocks down. So if you move them over a bit onto another block, you can push them up using a piston. And then I can just place a block below them, and because the center of the block is actually over here, it should place the block. So now we can get an end gateway, which is a pretty cool looking block. And I've also gotten these seamless double slabs, and I've started moving in some of these falling blocks over here. So I'll continue doing that and see you guys then. So it's actually been a couple of days now, which is also visible over there because there is a bunch of falling blocks over there now. And there is a couple of things I want to show you because I actually discovered a new discontinued item. Because if you have the falling lapis lazuli ore block and you destroy it, you can see you can get this magenta and black box item. And this is actually a damage value 3 lapis lazuli ore item, and that's why it doesn't have a texture associated, because you're not supposed to get this. And the reason the lapis lazuli ore drops this instead of just a normal ore is actually because of this lapis lazuli item. As you can see, it says in the advanced tooltip, it says it's actually a die with damage value 4. So the block that the lapis lazuli ore drops also always has damage value 4. So that's why this ore, which is just an ore block, can also get damage value 4. And then there is actually a bunch, I believe 2 more difficult blocks to get. One of them is over here. This is the piston arm block, as you can see. I've obtained that one, and then there is also the bed falling block. And as you can see, there is a bunch of falling blocks that I haven't obtained, like rails and mostly plants, because when you have a plant and the contraption actually successfully word tears the plant to be in this position, so that a falling block of such a plant or a rail or something can be created, then almost instantly afterwards this observer pulses again, and then this block at this position is deleted, while this block at this position should stay over here at least until the next entity phase, because when the entity falling block gets ticked and there is not the corresponding block in this position, the falling block deletes itself and then you can't get the item. But the exception to this is actually beds and piston arms, because you can actually get them, because they're of course made out of 2 blocks. So if we have a bed in this configuration and we word tear a bed with this shape, so it checks if the block in the this is the north direction, if the block in the north direction is a bed, and we just have another bed over here, then it doesn't actually check the direction this bed is facing, and then you can actually update this bed block without it breaking. And the same goes for piston. If we have an extended piston in this bed position and it doesn't matter which way it's facing, then the piston arm won't delete itself. So that's just piston. If it's this way and it's extended, then the piston arm won't delete itself and you can get those items. And this bed block over here is actually invisible because it's the tile entity of the bed that decides which color and which texture it has. So that's the reason for that. But all of the just normal blocks like stone I have obtained, and the dirt and grass. Then all of the plank variants, and then we have saplings over here which I can't get. This is bedrock, normal water, flowing water, and lava would be over here. These are of course normally obtainable. Then we have the ores and the logs and the leaves. Should go back over there. And the order I've obtained these blocks in is actually the block ID order. So if you have a stone block, don't have it on me right now, then the stone block is ID 1 and a grass is ID 2 and so forth, and leaves are ID 18 or 17 I think. Glass is 20 I think. And then this is 19, so this is indeed 18. Then we have the 2 sponge variants, and glass, and lapis lazuli, and the lapis lazuli block. This is the first ore block that was added in the game. And then we get a dispenser out of nowhere, which is kind of weird, because you wouldn't expect a dispenser to be added before redstone was added, but this actually has to do with some blocks that were deleted, mainly the wool blocks. There were these wool blocks that were actually called cloth in InDev, and they didn't have damage values to determine their color, so they took up 15 blocks. But they were later removed and replaced with wool, which does have 15 damage value, so it doesn't take up 15 block IDs anymore. So this dispenser and sandstone and stuff was actually added way later. So sandstone variants, node blocks, the bed, the rails were all added later, all in beta of course. The piston, cobweb. Then this is the tall grass variants, and this is actually not a dead bush, because as you can see it's on dirt, which isn't possible in 1.12, and that's because this is actually a shrub, which is another unobtainable item, and it converts to a dead bush in 1.13. And then we have the normal dead bush here. And also that item is textureless, I believe. So if I get shears, then oh no, it isn't textureless, but it's called shrub, as you can see. Then we have the pistons, and then we get the wool variants. That isn't that interesting, of course, just normal blocks. Then we have the moving piston, which when you drop it as a falling block in 1.12, it actually just places air, which is kind of strange. And in newer versions, it does actually place the block 36 block. Then all of these flower variants and mushrooms, which I can't get yet with this setup. And then we have more ore blocks. And then the double stone slab blocks. And there is a wood block in here. And you might think, well, why is that with the stone slab blocks? Well, this is actually the petrified wooden slab. So it says wooden slab and not oak wood slab. So that's the reason. These items are called petrified wooden slabs in newer versions. So I believe that's been it for this episode. In order to not make it be too long once again, I think we should cut it here and then try and obtain some more falling blocks in a next episode. So I hope you guys liked this episode, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and then I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye bye!